Well, Pastor Kirk, excited to have you talking church. Glad you're here. You're an experienced podcaster. We're also in your office, so thank you for letting us use your office. But
Anytime.
Pumped to have you here. Tell the millions of people listening out there what you do here and why you are wanting. Why you said yes to me asking you to be on this.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks for having me. And
we're gonna have fun. Kirk's the most fun.
I'm so happy to be here, and want to make it as valuable as possible for the millions of people listening. I'm pumped to be here, and Logan, I would say yes to anything that you're asking me to do, because grateful for your heart to pour into churches around our country, around the world. Anybody that would listen to this, it is one of the things we're most passionate about at River Valley is not just building our church, but building the kingdom of God and providing resources as much as we can. And so, I'm so happy to be here and grateful for you, your friendship. We've had many church conversations.
Oh yeah.
Even just outside of work.
Most of them are past 1 a.m. too.
Yeah, late into the night, in hotel rooms, just chopping it up.
Hotel lobbies usually.
Yeah.
We usually get different rooms.
Yeah, we'll cut that out. No, just kidding.
So what do you do at River Valley?
My title is executive beekeeper.
That is true. It is on his door.
No, that's not my actual title, but I do have. This is my first summer as a beekeeper, and it's been awesome. But that's not what the podcast is about. My job is looking after what we call local or the local church. And so Pastor Rob, who obviously started this church and has made room for this podcast and has already been on this podcast, he serves kind of in almost this global capacity. He's our lead pastor, but looks after everything from our local church to what you're looking after in influence and missions and global and everything. My role is really looking after the local church right now here in Minnesota. So we've got campuses around the Twin Cities as well as online. And my kind of primary role is looking after our campus pastors and their teams, as well as our central local church ministries. And so that's in 3 different divisions. One is local creative. That's worship and production. The other is Next Gen, which breaks into 4 different departments: youth, kids, our young adult ministry, as well as our leadership institute. And then also discipleship, which is everything from teams and groups and care, men's and women's ministries. So, it really, for me, being at River Valley Church the last 10 years, I've had different roles. This is the most fun and the greatest privilege to be able to look after what I look after, and hopefully I can do this as long as the Lord would have me, as long as Pastor Rob will have me. And I've been in this seat now for over a year, and it has been one of the most fun years in ministry. Most challenging too, with what we've navigated in our world and in the Twin Cities and in our church. But one of the most fun seasons of ministry, working with incredible people, including yourself. I feel like Kaylee and I, that's my wife, Kaylee and I are doing life and ministry with our best friends, and so grateful to be a part of this church.
Well, one of the things that people, when they talk about you, even those who are listening right now, they can tell you're a fun person. You know, if you're a beekeeper, you know, you got to be a beekeeper and a pastor, and you know, you got to be a fun guy. You just had twins too.
Just had twin boys.
Yeah.
They are, as we're recording this, they're 6 months old, and when this comes out, they'll be, just over that. So it's been awesome. They're sleeping through the night. It's crazy. Twin dad life. We also have 2 daughters that are older. So we've got 4 kids, 2 boys, 2 girls, and it's awesome. It's an adventure. It's crazy. And beekeeping is fun. Everybody needs to look up JP the Bee Man on YouTube. He's this guy from Louisiana that goes and picks up beehives, just no suit, no gloves, nothing, and he's insane.
And you actually have a beehive at the church, right?
Yep. It's on the
secret?
roof of. I don't think it's a secret.
Not anymore.
We asked about all the legalities. It's okay for them to be up there.
Okay.
And they've been doing a great job.
Making honey and
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I've harvested. I know everybody. This is why they tuned into the podcast. So
Yeah.
let me give you the detail. I've harvested now over 300 ounces of honey just out of this one little hive, and it's been fun.
Wow.
It's just a hobby. I get like my type of like learning and interest is like binge learning or binge hobbies or interests. I get hooked on something and I go deep. And so we'll see if next summer I'm around as a beekeeper or I might be doing something completely different.
I did that with woodworking during COVID, and I bought so many tools, and like all this last year I haven't really done anything with it.
You could build me my second beehive.
Kirk, I didn't do anything with it. I'm telling you, I didn't gain any skills. So,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
You just spent money.
But what I want us to talk about is I want to talk about culture, because as we've talked about, you're a fun guy. You're known to be fun, obviously in a high level leadership position, but both of us have been young adults pastors here at River Valley. I took over after you, and we've since transitioned to Pastor Katie. But we've been working in environments. You've been a campus pastor at multiple different campuses. And most people, I would say it's fun to work with you. It's fun to work for you. Obviously, when we're leading at a high level, we're instilling the leadership culture that my dad puts in place that is set by our leadership team. But you can have every church, every corporate company, they have a list of values. And some companies and churches, have values that they live out. And other churches, it's like, oh, those are the values that are on the wall or they're in the handbook, but you don't actually live out that value and you're not living it in a fun way. You're not having the culture as a staff. Talk a little bit about how maybe some of the ways you make sure that the teams that you oversee are living out the values. Because I'm sure every lead pastor, every church, they have a list. But when's the last time you looked at it, or when's the last time you've actually taught it?
No, that's a good question. I think practically we teach our values, not just our church values, but also there are leadership values that your dad has expressed over the years and has laid out in varying degrees of clarity. But it was probably a year and a half ago, 2 years ago now, that he laid out 12 different leadership culture values for our church. And
we have that on the network YouTube as well. They can watch.
So those 12 values we teach through in our staff meetings at our campuses, and that's awesome. But to your point, you can teach it, but if you're not living it out, then it's bogus. It's not a real thing. Everybody sees that. And in fact, one of our church values is authenticity. And whenever you're teaching something that you're not living it out, it's inauthentic and it's just not going to work. Which that's one of the reasons I'm grateful that authenticity is one of our values. And so I would just say, to the churches that are out there that are trying to develop their culture, one, feel free to look at anything that we're doing. You don't have to be like us as River Valley Church. That's okay if you're not. But if there's anything that you want to pick up or glean from, that's great. But it has to be authentic to who you are. And speaking to the culture of, you said the word fun a few times, and I'm grateful to be known, hopefully, as a fun person. That's cool. But one of the things that I talk about in different pockets of our teams is it's not just fun, like goofy. I think we need to be the best in ministry and as Christ followers at doing spiritual things in a spiritual way. And being careful about the worship of God. Like, it's not just, I think of, back in Leviticus where the sons of Aaron, they're having a little too much fun and they break one of the rules that the Lord told them not to break, and it cost them their life. There's still something, I know that's Old Testament, but there's still something in today, this awe of who God is and how powerful He is, and the call of God that's on our life as pastors and ministers that should be this working out in fear and trembling. Like, I hope that I'm doing everything that God's called me to do. Like, and when it comes to spirituality, when it comes to pastoring people, ministering to people, we're going to do it with great sensitivity, with great care, with great investment. Like, this is real. We look people in the eyes and we care for people. We are a church, and this matters. We're going to do spiritual things in a spiritual way. And that's one of the things that I think is beautiful too. It's kind of a tangent, but like, I grew up in the church. I grew up a pastor's kid, and I feel like I've been handed down from my parents just a great like spiritual legacy, not just that they were Christians, but how they prayed and how they prayed in the Spirit and how they led church, how they led meetings, how they, there's so much like that I've just picked up, like, and that's what it's been like generation after generation after generation. We're a part of the Assemblies of God. We're also an ARC church. And there's like this legacy we've picked up, and that's what I'm trying to pass off to the teams that I look after, the people that I look after, the next generation of pastors and ministers, that we need to teach people continually that the way that we do spiritual things should be in this spiritual way and this carefulness, like God is watching, God's eyes are on this, and all this really matters. Okay, so that's in tension or in balance with having a ton of fun. So we're gonna care for people well. We're gonna pastor people. We're gonna be intentional. We're gonna be authentic. We're gonna be in people's lives, in the trenches, through thick and thin. But also, we're gonna have a blast doing this. And I really believe God didn't call people into ministry. And if you're listening, you're in ministry, serving as a leader, or you're on staff, or you're a pastor of a church. God didn't call you to do that to just suck it up, just like grind it out, hold on, it'll get better in heaven. Like, that's not what God called you to do. God called you to really care for people, but also to enjoy this life. And that's something that hopefully I live out. Hopefully we're doing a good job teaching, and hopefully that's the culture of our church is we're gonna go after this thing because souls are on the line, people are dying, and we're hoping as many of them as possible are going to heaven. We want to expand the kingdom of God. There's an urgency and a seriousness to that, but also we're gonna love this thing, and I think also it's an evangelistic tool. Like, as we're trying to grow our church and reach more people, people look at us who are part of River Valley or on staff at River Valley. Look at us and say, what comes off of you, that's what a Christ follower looks like, and what is exuding from a Christ follower. It better be fullness of joy. It better be passion and excitement and laughs and smiles and hugs and high fives, and sometimes get a little loud, like that's what a Christ follower should look like. All of those things are just godly aspects. And I think it would be pretty scary if you looked at, if anybody listening came to one of our staff meetings or all staff meetings and felt like, wow, where was the joy, or where was the enjoyment, or where was the passion, and I would love to be a person that leads in a way, and I think it's the way Pastor Rob leads, is he leads passionate about prayer, but also passionate about the party, If anybody knows Pastor Rob, he loves the party.
Yes.
As much as he loves the prayer. Mm-hmm. And what the Holy Spirit's doing. And the Holy Spirit's not just moving in prayer, he's also moving in the party. So yeah. That's what we believe, and that's part of our culture, and hopefully expanding culture at our church.
Someone's going to take that snippet and say, Pastor Rob cares just as much about the party than the prayer, and they're going to say that's Pastor Rob. But I think there's something to be said about the why behind it. And I think that's, when you were talking, I think that's what I was thinking about, is like the why behind why we want to be filled with joy. I think John 17 talking about they'll know the love of the Father by the way that you love each other. Is it 14 or 17? But that level of staff culture is what we're talking about. And how can we expect to love the people in our cities, love the people in our countries, love the people where God has put us, if we can't even love the people that we're working with? My dad tells stories all the time about horrible staff
He's
cultures.
got crazy stories.
And just crazy stories about how they hate each other and how they, just were gripping things so tightly. And we're so blessed to not have that. And there's always pockets of things that you work out and you figure out. Just because you have a problem at a church doesn't mean you're a total failure. But I think there's maybe even people listening who have been on teams at churches, or maybe even the church they're at now, hopefully not, but I'm sure there are, where they're saying, that's not our culture. Like, we don't like being around each other. We don't like having fun together. We don't want to spend time with each other outside of work hours. And it's like, how sad is that to say the most important thing in my life, this call that God placed in my life to serve him for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And I don't even like the people that I'm doing it with.
Yeah, I think that's on the person. Don't point fingers at other people on your team or your staff. Like, nobody, I don't like them, and because they never do this, that, or the other thing for me. They're not interested in me. They're doing their own thing. They're building their own kingdom. They're whatever. Like, no, it's on you. Like, you create the culture. Like, set it up. That's what leadership's all about, anyways. You don't have to have the title or the position or the one in control of the meeting to influence the culture of your church and start building relationships. If you are a youth pastor and your worship pastor, you and your worship pastor aren't that close, figure out a way to get close. That doesn't mean you need to be best friends and hang out every night. Like, it means you got to set up a meeting and get to know their story and how they were raised and their background and why they are the way that they are and what they care about and things that they love and they're passionate. Like, get in people's worlds. Like, the staff unity or disunity can be solved by you. You can help stir that up and build unity within your team. And so, but I do know that is a reality for a lot of places, not just churches, but anywhere you work or anywhere you're on a team. Like, not everybody is super unified, and even at River Valley, we do go through things where it's like there are hiccups and also not just hiccups, major problems that happen in this world that could divide our team and our staff. But hopefully we do a good job. I think we do at talking, and we've gotten better, especially over this last year. Like, we got to talk more. We got to look each other in the eye more. We got to get lunch, we got to let's talk this out and work through things so that we can be unified. Doesn't mean we have to agree on everything, but it means that we have to know where each other's coming from and be unified. So,
well, it's no secret that here in Minneapolis, in 2020 last year, it was crazy. In every church, every pastor, I'm sure, I want to say the right thing. I don't want to make my church mad, but I also want to speak the truth biblically. If there's people that are off base, I want to address that as their shepherd.
Yeah.
But I don't want to say too much that I don't need to. And it's this tension. But what I've been hearing from pastors and friends in ministry, it's like, yeah, the church was one thing, but the staff, man, that was the hard part, because these are people you're trying to lead people. And when Jesus talks about, my yoke, it's like, my yoke is easy, my burden is light. But then Paul says, don't be unequally yoked. The reason is because you're pulling in different directions. Like, you can't lead something when you're being pulled in different directions. But then we're in the midst of this pandemic. We're in the midst of total unrest, shootings, killings that are happening, riots that are taking place.
Yep.
And then we're trying to lead people, but then you have people who are a part of the same organization that are leading people in different directions. Maybe neither of them is a bad direction, but just different ones.
Yep.
And we're having to manage that. Talk about some of the conversations you had. Obviously, we're not saying, hey, I had a conversation with this person or this person.
Oh, I'll expose them. I have no problem. I'm kidding.
But what some of those conversations look like to say, hey, maybe you're going this direction, which again isn't a sinful direction or a bad direction, but there was a time we told our staff, everyone on staff, nobody's posting on social media for these 3 days.
Yeah.
Not because we don't trust you, but because there is a unity that's needed or in this season for our church. And it doesn't mean you don't have a voice. It doesn't mean you can't have conversations with people in your congregation, your small group, your teams. It's just social media specifically. We need to put this on pause And I remember when we made that decision, it was like, how's this going to go? And I know we had some conversations with people who said, oh, I didn't know that's what we meant or that. But like, talk a little bit about like how that worked for us. Because I know you had some of the conversations with people who maybe were upset about it, or people who posted and they did it in a good heart. But it was like, oh, I totally forgot that we had that thing.
I think leading through that situation is really Pastor Rob and Becca, like the spearhead leaders of making really hard decisions and also determining where are we going as a church and how are we going to respond and what are we doing. A lot of the conversations I had were, I think our team is incredible, because a lot of the conversations that I had were people asking, can you help me understand where this decision's coming from? Help me get a higher perspective. Help me come into alignment, and really having like great heart behind that. I think we've grown as a church and as a team as well, that it wasn't always like that. But the example that you're bringing up right there was the response. I felt like it was a very healthy response from our team of like, help me understand. And so a lot of it was just trying to paint a picture of empathy towards our leaders, Pastor Rob and Becca, and just a leadership principle in general of like, and I think it's a humble place to be, of like, I don't see everything. I'm not in every conversation like they are. I don't have the weight on my shoulders like they do. I haven't had the sleepless nights like they have. I haven't had to put things on the line like they have. Like I know things that your parents talked through, Logan, that during COVID, during the last year, like, where it's like, are we prepared to put our house up if we had to? Are we like not knowing like the outcome of all this stuff? That's like a real weight. And I think growing in the position that I sit in, I think I've had to grow in helping not only myself but others grow in their empathy towards leadership. Sure. Like, I may not make all the same decisions that they do, but I trust them.
Yeah,
I'm with them. Help me understand. Asking questions. Help me understand. Help me to get a higher perspective. Those types of things. And so I don't know if I'm actually answering your question, but what I was going to say too, just before you move forward, is I think we also in leadership, and the higher you go in leadership, is like, let's stay good with spending time with people. All of those conversations with people were not 5-minute phone calls.
Yeah.
A lot of them were like 2 hours, 2.5 or 3 hour conversations with people, helping them navigate. Because a lot of the people that, like, if you use a term like out of alignment or disagree or upset about this or like had questions or anything like that, all the conversations I had ended amazing. Yeah. People like, I love this church. I'm grateful for Pastor Rebecca. I understand better kind of where we're going. It didn't necessarily mean like, oh, I would do it exactly the same way now that I know that, and they didn't, it's not that we brought them in on every aspect of the decision-making process, but I think people take time, and unity takes time, and alignment takes time. And so anyways, I just had to grow in like, man, I need to be reminded, like, people work takes time, and I am growing in like loving this. I love spending time with people and talking. This is supposed to be a 30-minute podcast. We could go 2 hours, like, cause I love the time with people. And man, if we grow in ministry and we think like church growth and the next system and the next thing is going to get me away from spending time with people, one, that's a wrong attitude. And two, it's incorrect. Like, you got to be with people and you got to love it, to longevity in ministry.
You look at Jesus, and, even in a meeting earlier today, my dad was talking about that. Like, Jesus constantly went from the crowds down to the few, to the crowds, to the few, spending a lot of time with people. And he was even okay with like less people. And he would say, hey, count the cost. There's going to be less people that come. There's going to be half the people, they're going to leave. But I think on our teams and in our for a church, maybe it's not staff, maybe it's deacons, maybe it's key leaders.
Yep.
Are we willing to put in the time? And I think it's what you were sharing was so good. The lesson for both, I think, the person who's under authority and the person in authority. The person who's under authority, it's you need to prayerfully consider and be aware that you don't have all the context, because there's decisions that leaders have to make to where they do have the full picture. And so asking that question, that's such a good question. You don't have to just suppress it. And I think that was something that was super amazing to hear from, our leadership team was, if you have questions, we want to talk about it. Talk to your manager, talk to your leader about it. Like, we don't want to just say, hey, here's a mandate. You got to listen. If you bring up a question, you're fired.
Yeah.
It's hey, if we want to be open to this, it comes from our value of authenticity. We don't nail it every time, but it's having that approach as a employee or someone under authority to say, help me understand.
Yeah.
To say, first of all, we want to have a culture to where they're comfortable to ask that question, but then to not go and say, I disagree with this. This is a horrible decision. But hey, help me understand it, because clearly I'm missing something. And then if the 3-hour, 2-hour conversation of help me understand doesn't get you to the place where you understand, then you have to make a decision to say, is this a place, am I aligned with culture? Is this the place I want to be? And it may be a bad leader, or it may be that you're not the right fit. It doesn't always have to be a bad leader or a bad situation. It might just not be that you're the right fit. But then on the inverse of that, as a leader, you also have to know your people don't understand because they don't have all the context. And so you can't expect, like, I'm just going to make a decision that I have all the context for, but I can't share it all. And I'm just going to expect that they're going to just blindly follow me and do whatever I say. And that's also an unhealthy culture. If they just do it, well, what they're doing is they're building resentment. And so I love that we are in the process still of learning what that looks like. But I think that's such a good lesson to say, wherever you're at, whether you're a leader or serving a leader, it's know that there's context missing and do whatever you can to learn and talk and be open in the midst of those difficult seasons, for sure.
This conversation too is just a reminder of the love we have to have for people and the time that we're willing to put in with them. And not every problem can be solved in 15 minutes. And also not every problem needs to be talked about in 3 hours either. So that's also not what I'm saying. But just the love for people and the time to put in, and being committed to relationships. And also, I love that you were like, today Pastor Rob was in this meeting. Like, Pastor Rob is a leader of leaders, and he's still going to meetings, and he's still involved, and he's still, and I think the meetings that he's a part of is not every campus staff meeting. Like, the meetings have changed, but he's still engaged. This is not like, he hasn't built something to the point of like, I can just peace out, like he could, but he's still engaged. And I love that about Pastor Rob, is like, he's still a part of this thing and his heart is in it. Like, if he's gone on a weekend, whether he's speaking at another church or traveling for missions or whatever he's doing, he's still texting on Sunday morning our campus pastors saying, praying for you right now as you get ready to preach, praying for services. Like, he's in it, and that's relational people work,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's always watching online if he's not there. Or he even was talking the other day. He's like, how can I stay more connected with the team if I'm gone? Like, if I'm on a trip that's a couple weeks, can I send a video? Or like, how can I stay connected? And I think that's ultimately his heart. Is, I mean, it's fun to serve. We talk about him a lot. Obviously, we work super close with him. But I think
we like him.
Yeah, we like him, and there's an authenticity that he carries that. It's easy to talk about him in a good way, because it's not just because he's our boss. It's like there's that authenticity that him and my mom, they carry. And I know there's lots of people that's like, oh, I can talk about my lead pastor in a great way, but like maybe don't have that same relationship that we have. But it's definitely a gift for sure.
And that's a good like podcast idea in the future, is have your parents talk about how they've grown as leaders over the years, because that's the one thing I've seen too, is like today on this podcast, there's so much good to talk about, but also knowing that they are growing.
Yeah.
They're growing every single day, and that's what I appreciate too. Like, they're not perfect leaders, but they're growing, and they're sensitive to the Holy Spirit, and I can be here as long as the leader, whoever is at the tip of the spear, sensitive to the Holy Spirit and continuing to grow. You see that, and it's like, man, I've got all the empathy and grace in the world. Like, I'm ready to roll. Let's do this thing.
Yeah. Already coming up with new ideas. Come on. Executive producer.
Just trying to add value, you know? I'm kidding.
Come on. Well, if you're listening and you want our 12 leadership values as a staff, we can send those over if you just email network@rivervalley.org. But want to give you one more opportunity if you say, hey, before we close, if there's any other thoughts on culture, on staff, relationship. I know we kind of talked through a lot, and like you said, we could have talked for hours more, but if there's anything that you say, hey, I got to get this out, or I want to share this with those listening before we close.
Nothing major. I think, when you said, hey, come on the podcast, let's talk church culture. I think like practical things just before we leave, because I think every church should be doing this no matter what their size or no matter what their staff size is. I think these are like basic, like managerial, but also leadership that it's easy to miss like in church work because it's like, oh, we're just doing this together. We're just doing it. But one is when you have staff meeting, this is just an encouragement. I think this is like major cultural stuff. When you have staff meeting, if it's weekly, because we have church every week.
Yeah.
And here's an encouragement. Don't let it just be a debrief of what happened last Sunday and a planning meeting for what's coming this Sunday. Do that in a different meeting, in a different setting. Let your staff meeting be the epicenter of what your church's culture is and should feel like. Your weekly staff meeting should be the best version of what your church culture is. That will then leak into what happens through your ministries and on your weekends. And so we try to make every campus staff meeting kind of the epicenter. We do something called all staff once a month. This is what our church culture is, feels like. This is what it is, And so a lot of that is we have time of worship and prayer. We have time of celebration every staff meeting. We have developmental time, like we are teaching on our values. We are doing leadership development and teaching. We're doing Q&A. We're doing time together. We're doing coffee and snacks and breakfast and, even if you're just running over to the grocery store and getting a dozen donuts, it's just an encouragement for your staff meeting to pick that up and let that be the best version of what your church's culture is, so that gets multiplied through your pastors and leaders into your ministries and services. And the other thing too, just real quick, if you're a leader, a pastor, and you've got staff that you oversee, or you for sure have volunteers that you oversee, make sure in a managerial relationship that you are spending the appropriate amount of time with the people that you look after. Don't just do ministry with people and it's like, oh, we see each other every 7 days on Sunday and we do services together. No, if they directly report to you, you need to have one-on-one time with them. You need to know their story. You need to know their family. You need to care more about their family, their marriage, their children, their health, their future. You need to care more about that than the ministry that they are providing or they're doing or they're executing. And so let that just be like, as before you stop this podcast, make sure your one-on-ones are healthy and that they're in your calendar and that you as the leader are initiating that time, and make sure that your staff meetings are the epicenter of what your church's culture is. And side note, if you didn't pick it up, it already is the epicenter of what your church's culture is. So if your staff meeting sucks, I'm sorry to say, your staff culture and also just the culture of your church is probably not great. And I'm not trying to discourage. I'm just saying.
No, but I think it pinpoints for some people.
It's the authenticity part.
To say, why am I not getting the results that I was hoping for in this church? If staff meeting is a tough thing to get through every week, well, maybe start there. And I think that the reaction would be, well, if we don't have enough time. But I think that the unity and the growth of your team, the relational growth of your team in that 3 hours, 4 hours, however long it is, will make the rest of your week work way more efficiently and way better because you're breaking down walls. And when there's no walls, when there's no barriers, you can move so much faster.
Yeah, don't use the same excuse that your congregation uses to not tithe. We're talking about kingdom principles. Yeah. Don't say we don't have time to do great things and invest into people. Like, no, what they will produce as you take care of your people will be far beyond than if you were like, let's wrap it up. We talked about Sunday service. We're good. Let's go. Yeah. No, like let's do spiritual things in a spiritual way and have a lot of fun. And that takes time. Take it or leave it.
No, we'll take it. We'll take it. Well, Pastor Kirk, loved having you. Appreciate you. Excited,
love you.
Excited. We'll have you back. It'll be awesome. We'll bring donuts next time, right?
Huge thanks to Corey, to Lindsay, and to Zach, who are sitting behind the camera.
Oh, yeah.
And behind the microphones.
Praise God. And making us sound great.
Yep.
All right. See you guys.
See you later.